Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Crawley Borough Council Licensing Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Ashraf, Chair of the committee. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of fire alarm, please leave the building via the spiral staircase and the main reception door. Once outside, turn left and go to the fire assembly point on Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, you will be guided by the member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please note that there is no comment function available. The Council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done in accordance with the Council's published data retention policy. Anyone seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the room, you are consenting to your image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting or training purposes. The meeting agenda is available on the Council's website. Around these tables sit the committee members who will be taking decisions on the items before them. And Council officers are also present. First item on the agenda, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Burgess. Are there any other apologies?
I think Councillor Kayla Musa, I think she's sent her apology just now. She might be a bit late. If she doesn't make it, she might be a bit late.
I messed it up because I was supposed to pick her up.
Okay.
Disclosure of interest. I will now call upon committee members one by one to declare any interest in relation to either of the items. You are also advised by the monitoring officer to declare if you have been lobbied on either item. Councillor Ayling. Can you mic on, please?
Yeah, I've got no disclosure of interest, but I do have an email from a taxi, a member of the taxi community.
Councillor Balvin.
No interest to declare, but I again have received emails and been lobbied.
Councillor Burke.
Yeah, nothing to declare, just the emails.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. No interest to declare and lobbied on items 5 and 6.
Councillor Hart.
No disclosures of interest. I have been lobbied on items 5 and 6.
Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. No disclosure of interest, but I have been lobbied on items 5 and 6.
Councillor Irvine.
No interest to declare, but I have been lobbied on both items.
Councillor Jagger.
Good evening. I've no interest to declare and I have been lobbied by email on both items 5 and 6.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. No interest to declare, and I have been lobbied on items 5 and item 6.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I've no interest to declare, but I've been lobbied on items 5 and 6. Thank you.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. No interest to declare, and I have been lobbied on item 5 and 6.
No interest to declare, and I've been lobbied on items 5 and 6.
As a chair, I also declare I have no interest to declare, but I've been lobbied on items 5 and 6. Thank you. Item 3, minutes. The last meeting was held on 11th of November 2024. Does the committee agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting? Now we move on to public question time. The Constitution states that this item will last for 15 minutes and questions need to relate to an item on the agenda. I have had some requests to speak on the agenda items from specific individuals. So I will call on those individuals later in the meeting. Are there any questions on either of the agenda items? Yeah, please step forward. Please introduce yourself and question. Mike, please.
Is that one? Hi. Ashley Spears from Gatwick Airport Cars. As I'm sure you're all aware, we have exemption of livery at the airport. And my question is it possible to get that exemption extended to the local boys in the town? That's my question.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Can one of the officers please respond?
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. That would be a matter for the committee to determine.
Thank you. You have any supplementary questions or no? Please come forward, please.
Hello, my name is Don Barnes. I'm a Gatwick taxi driver and also Unite the Union representative. My question is simple and clear. The Group 2 medical. I want to know, can we get that medical taken anywhere? Why does it have to be with our own GP? I've had it before where you go to your GP, you can't get the medical done. They refuse to do it. I have to ask for extensions. When you look at the medical now, it's got a picture of my face on it. So I can't give it to a friend to go and get the medical done. I have to do it physically myself. I have spoken to other people in the licensing. If they have access to my medical records, what's the problem of me getting my medical done elsewhere?
Well, this policy is under review. We are not discussing this today. So at the moment, it is under review, but I ask officers if they want to add anything on this.
Through you, Chair, if I may, we are currently exploring the various options that are available to try and make it more flexible for the trade, ensuring public safety and fit and proper tests are in place. So we are exploring that, and it's an ongoing matter. Through you, Chair, again, the matter is under investigation. I can't give you a timeline, but we are working at pace, having had notification of this and expression of interest from the trade. But it does form part of the committee report, and it's in the report, but it's going to be explored later this year.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Please.
Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to say thank you for giving us the time for this evening for you to listen to our questions. My question is regarding the topographical test. As far as we're concerned, and as we know that we have been, as we lobbied certain councillors within this room, that the topographical test, and from the licensing department itself, that the topographical test is being stood down, or whatever you want to call it, like got rid of, for revenue purposes. And that's for us what we feel as if what that is doing is that is actually putting people at risk within the town. Has there been a risk assessment done? The health and safety of the residents of your ward is paramount as far as we're concerned, and we know you take that seriously. So we're asking you to actually look at this topographical test. Getting rid of it for revenue purposes isn't putting the public at...
That's the question.
I'm getting to it.
Yeah, because this is something we are discussing today and
Okay.
going to vote on it. There's nothing decided, so if you have any questions, please.
Okay. Right, regarding the topographical test, do you feel that it is putting the public safety at risk with them not knowing the local area?
Well, we are going to discuss this today. This is one of the agenda items, so councillors will have their concerns or their points on this. So then they'll have the opportunity to speak their mind and vote on it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Please.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. My name is Asad Sati, representing Hackney Association, Crawley. My question is, as you all, I believe, aware that we have enough, the number of drivers, and we're already struggling everywhere, like trip registration and all other ranks. So just humble question, are you guys or any considering like any more license given to more drivers, because there's only 7-8 spaces at trip registration and we are 123 active drivers at the moment, and always we have to go left and right and just wait for 2 hours, 3 hours, to get our turn. So that's my question, that if you are considering, please double check, we are already struggling badly. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you very much for your question, but we are not going to discuss today. Maybe in the future, increasing the numbers.
May I assist,
Yeah.
Chair? The matter is listed for consideration as part of your recommendations at 2.2, where it states that we agree whether the committee wishes to next consider the limitation policy on the number of Hackney Carriage proprietor licences issued by the Council. There is currently no time schedule associated with that, but it is a matter that is open to discussion and debate today, and I believe that's the reference that the gentleman that's just spoken is making.
You have any supplementary question on this? Yes. There.
My name is Mohammed Azawi, one of Gatwick Cars Airport drivers. Is more a request to you and to the officers here. We got a till plate in Crawley, in Gatwick. When I keep the till plate, as we're aware that the council is willing to change it to yellow plate to not differ us from the town drivers. I think the colour is the matter, but if we have an exemption to work with the till plate in Crawley, I think that would be good for all the parties here.
So
that's okay?
Yeah, I mean,
I said
just
it's a
the same.
request.
I mean, we are considering this matter today, so we'll have a discussion on this. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? No. So we move on to item 5, proposed revisions to private hire and Hackney Carriage licensing policy. We'll move on to report HCS-085. Please will the team leader for health, safety and licensing present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, all members will have had sight of the report before you. I don't propose to read it verbatim, but I'll do an executive summary unless you direct otherwise. The purpose of the report that's before you is to consider the form and content of the Council's Hackney Carriage and private hire licensing policy and to instate revisions as are details as per the recommendations at section 2. That is that to approve the recommended changes to the private hire and Hackney Carriage licensing policy as set out in this report in relation to disability awareness training for private hire operators as per Appendix A, knowledge test changes as per Appendix A, emergency equipment as per Appendix A, wheelchair assessments tests as per Appendix A, the removal of top boxes from private hire vehicles as per paragraph 5.3, the discontinuance of using teal plates for certain private hire vehicles as per paragraph 5.10. At 2.2, to agree whether it wishes to when it next wishes to consider the limitation policy on the number of Hackney Carriage proprietor licences issued by the Council. And 2.3 is to note that in line with the Constitution, the Head of Community Services, in agreement with the Cabinet Member Portfolio Holder for Public Protection and the Chair and Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee, has delegated authority to make minor amendments to the policy as stated at 2.3. 2.4, to note the Council's licensing authority's progress in relation to the adoption of the statutory taxi standards from July 2020, and identify at 2.5 any other areas of the policy, if any, that the committee wishes to update and agree when these matters will be brought back to committee for further consideration. Section 3 of the report provides you with an overview of the purpose of the licensing regime, which is public safety, and that's a primary purpose. And the revisions of the policy are designed to support and promote public safety, and the policy can be found in the body of the report as directed. The policy is deemed to be the primary purpose and the primary framework for which the Council makes decisions, with minor revisions as stated delegated to appropriate officers, it sets out the framework for decision making as part of the licensing process. Officers are responsible for the implementation of the policy, with each case looked at on its merits. As you will probably be aware, there have been various discussions with members of the Hackney Carriage Association, representatives from the private hire trade, and Unite the Union, who represent some of the licensed drivers regarding aspects of the policy. The key aspects of the discussions are included in the body of the report for consideration by the licensing committee, who are the body responsible for setting that policy. The recommended changes are seeking to reinforce the principle of public safety, to regularise some of the content and incorporate some of the standards within the Hackney Carriage and private hire trade, and to make it easier for people to understand, make it more accessible, and to incorporate local and national differences and revisions therein. Section 4 of the report provides you with a background of the licensing process in very general terms, but the primary purpose is to ensure that a licensed driver is a fit and proper person to act in that capacity. And you'll see at 4.1 the range of checks and tests that a licensed driver must undertake. As members are aware, there's been various statutory taxi standards and also best practice guidance detailed at 4.2 of the report. They primarily focus on protecting children and vulnerable adults, particularly within the context of the licensed trade and licensed Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicle. Many of those standards have been already incorporated into the policy, and the document sets out a framework of policies which the Council as licensing authority must have regard to when exercising their functions. And this includes deciding policy about standards at a local level, and how we regulate the licensing regime from a Hackney Carriage and private hire perspective. 4.2 gives you a bit of an overview of the rationale behind the policy document, and the government's rationale and desire to get a core minimum standards across the trade nationally, as there are quite wide variances currently. As I said, the standards have largely been adopted by the Council, and the following matters are still under consideration and will be revisited with leave of the committee in the future. The inclusion of mandatory CCTV, both audio and visual, with minimum standards and data management. The need to repeat mandatory training courses to ensure currency of information and knowledge within the trade. And thirdly, additional mechanisms in relation to vehicle emissions and safety standards. Those are matters that will be brought back to the committee at a later stage. At 4.4, the standards make reference to the requirement for individuals to be fit and proper, and 4.4 and 4.5 give you an overview of various extracts from the standards and the matters that need to be considered by the Council as licensing authority, having had regard for the statutory taxi standards and best practice guidance from the Department of Transport. At 4.5, we've included reference to the best practice guidance that local authorities should have regard to, and further information is included in the body of the report. There are various recommendations at section 5 of the report recommended arising out of the best practice guidance, which I've just referenced for you. And you are asked to consider those matters in more detail. These relate to, and they are incorporated at Appendix A, the disability awareness training for private hire operators, to ensure a greater currency of information and understanding of their equality requirements and disability awareness. Wheelchair accessible training and assessments for all individuals who are responsible for operating and driving a wheelchair accessible vehicle, also known as a WAV, and the removal of certain requirements pertaining to emergency equipment relating to the firefighting equipment, fire extinguisher and first aid kit, as it's submitted to the committee that licensed drivers in the main are not properly qualified to use those items. And also the recommended removal of the topographical test element of the knowledge test in respect of new applicants wishing to become private hire drivers. This is supported by officers since private hire vehicles are pre-booked and licensed drivers can plan their journeys accordingly, be it by use of manual maps or satellite navigation devices, either remotely or through mobile phone devices. So that's the first section. 5.3 covers the private hire livery requirements. It's also recommended that the licensing committee adopt the best practice guidance recommendations and remove, with effect from the 1st of April 2025, the requirement for top boxes across the whole of the private hire fleet. 5.4, it also is recommended that the roof boxes for private hire vehicles is removed, as it's argued that the inclusion of a top box confuses them between a private hire vehicle and a Hackney Carriage vehicle. 5.4 gives you what the guidance says about top boxes and the importance of differentiating between Hackney Carriage vehicles and private hire vehicles, and the recommendation is that top boxes are removed throughout the fleet. 5.5 is that if the committee decides to remove the requirement for top boxes, it gives an implementation overview, and it is recommended that if top boxes are removed, that the requirement for the rear licence plate and the internal plate remain. In respect of Hackney Carriage vehicles, the requirement to include a top box that can illuminate does not change, nor does the requirement for an internal plate or rear vehicle plate. The position regarding top boxes and full vehicle livery in respect of Hackney Carriages, as I've said, will not change. It will stay as is. But it is important that those are distinct and different from one another. At 5.7, I just want it noted by the committee that we are currently working with the trade to look to upgrade and improve livery to better reflect the council's corporate image and to aid the identification of any vehicles for the travelling public. 5.8 covers the position with regard to livery and rank provision at Gatwick Airport. And following discussions with the holder of the private hire operator licence in respect of Airport Cars Gatwick and Gatwick Airport Limited, as part of the rebranding exercise, a request has been received to remove all teal coloured plate from vehicles and all top boxes from the private hire vehicles associated with Gatwick Airport and those vehicles that are operating under the auspices of Airport Cars Gatwick. For clarity, the teal branding of vehicles associated with the airport work was previously used as a means to identify those vehicles carrying out airport-type work, and they were afforded an exemption. 5.9 goes into more detail there. It's important to note that private hire vehicles at the airport are no particular difference to private hire vehicles in the borough, in the wider borough, who work across the town, and 5.9 gives that overview. Officers are recommending that the committee agree with the request to discontinue the use of the teal colour plates and for all private hire vehicles, for private hire vehicle internal and rear plates to be issued in a yellow colour across the fleet, as has been requested by Airport Cars Gatwick. The policy allows the council to exempt certain vehicles from the requirement to have door livery, and those vehicles which work through the airport currently avail themselves of that exemption. It's important to note that the exemption would continue in relation to vehicles working from Gatwick Airport, but would still require and be the case that door livery would be required if any of those vehicles carried out work for other private hire operator companies in the borough. The wider policy decision and issues relating to door livery will be revisited later in 2025. The next point that was raised with the trade and that has been progressed was the provision of rank space at Gatwick Airport for Hackney Carriage vehicles. We've had various meetings with the Hackney Carriage Association, to which Councillor Khan, the portfolio holder, was also present, and we've had discussions with the airport about a provision of a rank at Gatwick Airport for Hackney Carriage vehicles. Work is ongoing in relation to identifying suitable rank locations within the borough, in the town, but the airport have indicated that they are not minded to provide a Hackney Carriage rank at this time, and it is not part of their wider agenda or plan. However, we will continue to work with the Hackney Carriage Association to try and instate ranks across the borough so that the travelling needs of the public are taken account of in key locations. The other matter that has been discussed was the limit on Hackney Carriage proprietor licences within the borough. Currently, there's a limitation policy of 123 Hackney Carriage proprietor licences. Those are the vehicles with numbers 73 to 123, which have a wheelchair accessible requirement attached to them. This limitation policy is supported by an unmet demand survey, which is scheduled to be reviewed and undertaken again in approximately 6 months, 16 months' time, perhaps a little longer. And you'll see as part of the recommendations, we are asking the committee to determine whether they wish the matter to be brought back sooner. And at 5.18, it gives you an overview of the guidance which states about quality, the impact of quality restrictions such as Crawley has at this time. I don't propose to go to that in great detail, but that gives you an overview of the impact of limitation policies and matters for you to consider. At 5.19, we're seeking the direction of the committee to, as to whether it wishes to review the limitation policy earlier than scheduled, as set out in 5.2, although there is not a specified timeline for that as such, and if so, when that matter needs to be coming back to committee for further consideration. There are also other updates and minor amendments to the policy proposed. The matter has already been raised as part of your question time in relation to driver medicals at 5.20. We are currently working at pace to see if medicals can be provided by nominated providers so that drivers can have a more accessible service on the proviso that their medical records can be accessed and a full schedule of their information be accessed and a determination made that they meet Group 2 standards. And some revisions to Appendix L, the enforcement section, in relation to penalty points and the Code of Conduct scheme. Following feedback from the trade at 5.21, members are asked to note minor revisions will be made to the policy via the delegation scheme in relation to the use of handheld devices whilst driving. This has come about because officers have noticed a significant increase in the number of licensed drivers using handheld devices whilst driving, which poses a significant public safety risk. Also, the requirement to carry assistance dogs. Further clarification will be included there to avoid confusion, as there have been some questions arising from the obligations of licensed drivers in that regard. Section 6 gives you an overview that there will be, dependent on the decision taken by the committee this evening, revisions to licence conditions in the policy, and if any matters are changed or agreed, it's likely that revisions will need to be made to the vehicle, driver and operator licence conditions, as well as the wording of the policy itself. Therefore, a timeline will need to be considered with any agreed changes alongside an implementation timetable. In Appendix A, you will note with some of the recommendations that are there is a deadline, there is a suggested timeline for members to consider. Section 7 of the report gives you the financial and legal obligations, and you'll also note there's an equality impact assessment that has been undertaken in conjunction with this report today. Thank you.
Thank you. As Councillor Abu Musa joined us a bit late, can I ask if you have any declaration of interest or you have been lobbied on any of the items?
Good evening, Chair. Sorry for being late, first of all. No interest to declare, but I have been lobbied for items 5 and 6 in the agenda. Thank you.
I'll use my discretion as chair to allow the speakers who have requested in advance to address the committee. I now call upon the Unite representatives to speak on this item. Please approach the speakers table. You have 5 minutes each to address the committee, and you will see countdown clock to my left. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nicholas Fiends. I'm the convener of Gatwick Airport United Cars. Sorry, United, not United Cars. United at Gatwick Airport Cars. The removal of the topographical test appears to prioritise administrative convenience and potential revenue gains over ensuring that drivers don't have essential knowledge of the local area. This decision raises serious concerns about the council intends to maintain the passenger safety. That's paramount for us, is the passenger safety. Without a topographical test, this is a significant risk that drivers, with the lack of necessary understanding of local knowledge, and it was stated earlier about that we can use physical maps. I don't know if I can do that when I'm driving. I think that is against the law. And the GPS, it doesn't always work. And also, if you know the local areas, you actually know where there is roadworks and everything through the actual network within Crawley. Such gaps in the knowledge compromises passenger safety and reduces public convenience in the taxi service. Licensing committee must provide a clear explanation for its decisions beyond its financial motives. It is essential that alternative measures are introduced to ensure drivers possess adequate local knowledge and the safety of the residents remains the council's top priority. The lack of proper consultation with residents, taxi drivers, private hire drivers and the industry representative only adds to the concerns that are surrounding this decision. Also, regarding the door signage on the vehicles, we already have dispensation at Gatwick Airport, and what we wanted to do is what we felt as if we could not ask you guys, but what we want to lobby you guys now is about getting rid of the door signage for the drivers at Gatwick if they work in the town by us being able to put our roof boxes on. That's the intention to do with the working for other operators in Crawley so that we can do school runs within the winter periods. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers?
We, the drivers at Gatwick Airport, are facing increasing hardship as our work has declined to below 50%. The situation is becoming unsustainable, with many of us are waiting 4 to 5 hours between jobs. This prolonged downtime is making it extremely difficult to earn a living, and its a financial strain is growing day by day. With the quieter months ahead, we are deeply concerned and how we will manage to support ourselves and our families. We strongly believe that securing a school run opportunities will provide essential relief for drivers struggling to make ends meet. Since Gatwick drivers already have an exemption on livery, we believe that this exemption was to be extended into the town. It would allow us to do school runs during the quiet period, offering a much needed financial lifeline. We hope this will recognise our urgency of the concerns. We greatly appreciate your opportunity to discuss this matter. Thank you.
Yes. Come forward.
Hi. My name is Afzal Hassan and I work at Gatwick Airport Cars. A few things to say just about the knowledge test. We have seen previously that our Crawley Borough Council, especially the Health and Safety Department, had pride about all these rules and things in place which distinguish us to carry the knowledge test and pass through a lot of tests and scrutinies to become a taxi driver. Now, removal of that, in my opinion, would damage that image, and we would see a bigger surge in coming the taxi drivers who would not have the information about the roads. Obviously, we have seen within our town, as a result of the cross-border hiring, we see the drivers who are working here, but they don't live here. They don't have to pass the knowledge test. Either they are working on TFL plates or other borough plates, and they are using their sat-navs or phone devices. when they don't have the knowledge of the area, they don't know which lane to choose, and a lot of times it causes traffic chaos, congestions, and problems as well. A lot of passengers have moaned about that the driver didn't even knew where this address was. So this will raise the concern about public safety as well. And the other thing about removal of all these signage and everything from the cars, when we had issues about breaking into the cars, and there was about over 100 cars were broken into, we came in and requested for the magnetic things or removal of these signage so that we can hide our taxis from these people who are breaking into our cars, and no exemption was given at that time. I want to know why our taxi licensing department is considering to lower their standards at this time. And third thing I would like to say is, whether it is financial deficit or whatever, opening doors without knowledge test will overflood our already, hardly surviving taxi trade. And it will bring a lot of drivers from outside who wouldn't have any other purpose but just to saturate the market here because of the Gatwick airport. Our economy runs more than 70 to 80% of Crawley through Gatwick airport. So we will be another bad example of Wolverhampton, but the drivers will not leave Wolverhampton. They will not leave Crawley, they will stay here. I think that's also consider the point that why a lot of private hire drivers have left Crawley license and went to other boroughs and acquired the licenses over there. Rather than addressing those points, opening the gates to cover the financial deficit, I think that is a very simple solution that the proposal has come from, rather than considering that what's going to happen to those 600 or 700 private hire drivers whose work or trade or business is going to be badly affected when you're going to bring another 1,000 drivers there, when there's no work for them at all. Thank you very much. Consider those options.
Sorry. No. I just wanted to highlight to the committee that there were 2 statements submitted about this matter, which are included in your supplementary agenda. So the committee will now consider the matter. Committee members wishing to speak should raise their hand, and officers will respond to the query one by one. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Nawaz, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to officers bringing this report in front of us, and it's quite comprehensive and it looks like a lot of work has been gone in. It does look like, when you look at the number of pages, it seems like a simple report, but when you deep into it, it's quite complex. I think matters has been discussed over here. I think one of the things which have been mentioned by many times today is about the knowledge test changes. I think this is quite important. We need to see, is the public safety really at risk with that? We have seen many times in locally in Crawley as well, where people from different authorities who are driving in Crawley gone into the one-way systems and created a little mess in here. So I think removing that knowledge test, my question is, how a risk has been made against that point specifically to say that it's safe to do that. In the same way, initially been mentioned to point 5.21, where it said we need to think, Carriage reporting the use of phones and devices is now on the increase. And I believe it's legally not allowed to touch a screen when you're driving. So if that is the case, how come without the knowledge they will be able to do that? Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. The rest of the committee seem unusually reticent in speaking, so I'm sure that will change. But, I mean, I understand the process tonight is the committee will vote individually on each of the items proposed for change in the policy. And I will reflect carefully on what is said, but here are my initial thoughts. Getting rid of the knowledge test for private hire drivers, I'm quite resistant to this. I want high standards and for them to know where they're going. Also, I would observe, I think it's a bit unfair on all the other existing drivers who've been made to learn it. I am aware of the arguments, and may I say just that I stress entirely that this is not the officers making this argument, but I'm aware of the arguments that people could go elsewhere to get their licence if we don't make it easier. But I find that most frustrating of all, and it has to be said, it's a logical consequence of the previous government's decision to relax the cross-border rules. It's driving down standards, and councils that try to maintain them can be punished financially for not doing so. Now, the topographical test, I mean, I did look it up just to check I wasn't getting this wrong, is the knowledge test. It's designed to evaluate a driver's knowledge of Crawley's geography, including the location of major landmarks, roads and routes. With the greatest respect, I think it's important we keep it, not just trust the sat-nav. Because I think there could be situations where you need to know where you are in the borough, and I as an old chair of the licensing committee myself, Chair, I always used to expect my drivers to know where they were in the borough. So, just on a related theme, I mean, the removal of the top boxes, to my mind, I'm a little bit concerned about it because I fear it's opening up the precedent for pressure to remove livery and other things. And that, to me, is the danger that we're at the beginning of the thin end of the wedge. And there's not many people who've been on the licensing committee as long as I have now. But I can remember when we were in the old town council chamber, when we had a licensing committee, we had the issue of the liveries and the top boxes come up. And back at the time, we had to tell the local trade at the time that we thought it was important that we kept it. And there were reasons why we thought it was important to keep it, Chair. One of them was, if you've got that, or if you've got everything on, it's much more difficult to masquerade as a taxi when you aren't. And there is an element of safety here. And if I'd seen the report, I would have said it before now. I'm just on the point as well to do with this. I thought there was actually a practical point as well, which probably wouldn't be noticed until you actually got to the point of it being in practice, which is it will actually slow down people getting their taxis if they look too similar to other cars. If you're sitting in the private hire office or you're standing on the road and you see a car approaching and it doesn't have the top box on, you might just assume it's another car. I'm sure the taxi drivers wouldn't need to tell me people can be quite slow on the uptake, and I'm one of them when I'm sitting in the office. But that's another matter. Let's say some supportive things now, Chair. I do support the removal of the need for fire extinguisher and first aid kit, because if there's no requirement for the drivers to know how to use it, I think it's a bit pointless them having it. The hope that sort of like their taxi might have a passenger in it who's a member of the fire service or from St John's ambulance seems remote. So the utility of that would be relatively small. Finally, just is on this report reviewing early the limit on Hackney carriages. I would just ask who thought this needed to be considered, because I would have thought this should have been dismissed out of hand. There's no evidence to my mind this is necessary, as any look I've had at the ranks at Three Bridges Station or the High Street or Hazlitt Avenue would suggest that, to my observation at least, that there's still an overwhelming number of taxis at most times. And so it wouldn't be a good idea at present to review it, because there's arguably limited room on the existing taxi ranks as it is, without allowing the numbers to swell further. And my view would be, I would propose that this is reviewed in time for the next, when the next survey is due in approximately 16 months. I don't see the need to revisit this decision. We revisit it fairly regularly, and so I think those would be the major points on the report that I'd like to speak on. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to talk about the topographical test as well. I think it is important. We can't rely on sat-nav, because I recently went to London and sat-navs are sometimes really slow. They tell you at the last minute to change the lane, and in London and in some areas you cannot change the lane. It took me over an hour. I was going round and round and round. So you've got to have the knowledge. You can't rely on sat-nav. I think, no, we should not get rid of that. And also the door livery and the top boxes. Quickly, another example. I was in Tooting the other day with a friend and her daughter, and we were sitting in the car, and all of a sudden somebody swung open my door, and we looked, and she said, "Oh, you're not my Uber." So she thought I was her Uber, and I said, "No, I'm not your Uber. I can charge you if you want me to." But no, that's a joke. But I said, "No, I'm not your Uber." So can you see, it can be really scary for women, and if you're on your own, and I would not go into a car where there's no signage or anything outside. So I could have been anyone. So I think it's really important to keep some sort of signage on the vehicles, or the door livery, or the top boxes. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I find myself in a strange position of agreeing entirely with Councillor Jones tonight. It's very unusual. The knowledge, yes, I have been in a, coming home one evening, I called a taxi and it came, and they clearly had no idea where they were going. They were using their sat-nav. They touched their sat-nav whilst I was in, their phone, which I wasn't particularly happy with. They clearly had no idea, because the sat-nav takes you one way into Maidenmouth as opposed to the quickest way. So I absolutely 100% think that a knowledge of the taxi drivers is hugely important, and I think it is something that we should definitely keep, because I think it gives everybody the reassurance that our taxi service knows exactly what they're doing and they are serving the community well, and I think that is vital. The issue of the top boxes, I'm not so sure about. I've got no particularly strong feelings about that. But the door signage, I do have strong feelings about, and I've argued this before. As a woman getting a taxi, often on my own at night, when the door signage is there, you can clearly see it's a taxi. It says United or Metro or whatever it says on the door. You know that's the vehicle you are waiting for. You don't go round to the back to check the little licence plate. And once you're inside, you can see possibly the licence plate that's inside, but you're inside by that point, and that's no good at all if it's a vehicle masquerading as a taxi when it's not truly so. So I would very much vehemently, want to keep the door livery and as a permanent livery, because when we argued about it before, there was the possibility of having it removable and then stick-onable, which I think we decided was unsafe, because it could fall off or be taken off at any point in time by somebody who wasn't quite as honest as everybody should be. So that's my feeling on this. The knowledge, absolutely, I believe we need to keep it. The livery, absolutely, we need to keep it. The other things, top boxes, I'm not so bothered. But I'll go with guidance from everybody else on that. Thank you.
Right. Can I just add 2 points here, and then I ask officers if they want to address some of the questions raised. So I was looking at best practice guidance, and as per the best practice guidance, section 6.4, it recommends that you should have the topographical assessments for private hire vehicles, and I think even their survey says majority agreed with that. And also with regard to the removal of top boxes, I was looking at the best practice guidance in 5.23, where it says, it sort of advocates having more and more signs than, removing the signs. So these are the two things I picked from best practice guidance as well. So I asked officers if they want to comment on these. Thank you.
Which aspect would you like me to comment on, Chair?
Sorry?
Which aspect would you like me to comment on, Chair? The statements that have been made by other councillors, or
yes, any of the questions is if you want to come back to.
Forgive me, I'll try and decipher where there were questions as opposed to statements. It's a little confusing. A question was raised as to why the matter of the limitation policy was being brought to this committee. As the licensing committee, you direct the policy and its content, and we have had feedback from licensed drivers who are unable to secure a Hackney Carriage proprietor licensed vehicle because of the limitation policy, asking when they could secure such a licence. Because of the limitation policy, that isn't possible currently. So that's why this matter has been brought back to you for direction and consideration. There is a current unmet demand survey in place, and the limit currently remains at 123 licensed vehicles. The issue with regard to the knowledge test, just a point of clarification there, Chair, it is not a recommendation of officers that the knowledge test is dispensed with entirely. The knowledge test covers a range of matters, including licence conditions, legal requirements, highway code obligations, safeguarding obligations, matters in relation to child sexual exploitation. The topographical test is one element, and the recommendation as per the best practice guidance is to remove that element for private hire drivers at this stage. It's not to remove the knowledge test in its entirety at all, as has perhaps been suggested. The issue with top boxes is as part of the best practice guidance, again, to remove top boxes from all private hire vehicles to aid identification and to differentiate between private hire vehicles and Hackney Carriage vehicles. So it's abundantly clear to members of the public who often don't know that difference that without a top box, it's a private hire vehicle. Our vehicles currently have permanent livery with specifications on the door signs and requirements that have to be met there. And our Hackney carriages are distinct and different. So they have a top box that can be illuminated, they can be flagged down in the street and or obtained from a rank. Private hire vehicles are prior booking only. I'm not sure, Chair, if I've missed any other questions. It was quite hard to decipher the questions from statements that were made, so forgive me if I've missed anything.
Chair, if I could answer Councillor Jones's question. The request to have the limitation policy reviewed came from drivers that approached officers and lobby members. So just wanted to answer that question. Yeah, so the request to review the Hackney Carriage limitation policy was a request that came from representatives from the trade and people that lobbied councillors.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'm not going to make a big, long speech about my personal experiences of being in taxis because I'm sorry to say, well, I'm not sorry to say, but I apologise to have to say that I never ever used taxis. Having said that, I'm very glad that Councillor Jaggard gave her view of the possible consequences of removing the door livery, because that's something I hadn't considered, and I think that's a very valid point. I also thank Ms Plimpton for explaining that the removing the topographical part of the knowledge test isn't removing the whole of the knowledge test, because that was one of the questions which I wanted to ask. So that leaves me really with the only question that I do want to ask, which is the topographical test, does it just cover the borough of Crawley, or does it cover further afield?
Chair, if I may respond to that, it covers the borough of Crawley and key locations in Crawley and key identifying venues, for example, schools, hospitals, public houses and so on. It covers the borough of Crawley.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Our purpose is to the licensing regime is around public safety, and I see a lot in the report about best practice, and clearly those two things are important. And then after that, I also take the view personally that we ought to be as less, put as few onerous burdens on the trade as possible. And there are some things in the report, such as the removal of the teal plates and the boxes on the roofs, which actually is one less requirement, as indeed is the proposal around the topographical test element of the knowledge test being removed. I take the view that to deviate from the best practice from the Department of Transport, I think a really good case needs to be made. Personally, if the committee decides that they want to keep the topographical test, excuse me, I have difficulty saying it, I don't have a particular issue with that one way or the other, but I just come from a point of view trying to sort of take away less onerous aspects on the trade, given that I am of the view that people in the trade are struggling. We've heard tonight about the difficulties in terms of getting jobs. Of course, one of the main taxi ranks that we had outside Marks and Spencer, because Marks and Spencer is now closed, so therefore there's going to be less demand for Hackney carriages overall. I would suggest as a result of that closure and that rank. Well, I don't notice any cars there now when I walk across the road into town. I see that we're going to be looking at livery later this year. I see that due to come to committee. So certainly I'd be interested to know more about that before taking a view one way or the other. But again, I come at this, once those other criteria are met around public safety and best practice, that to be as least onerous as possible upon the trade. And I've heard that there's been a request and also comments made about the when we should next do an unmet demand survey. Again, to deviate from the normal timescale, I would suggest that a good case needs to be made. However, I do think things have changed in the last couple of years, and I've just highlighted the loss of pretty much the loss of the use of the rank outside Marks and Spencer's, and I welcome the fact that the council's licensing department are working with the trade to look around other ranks that can be opened in the town. I really do welcome that. But we didn't hear any speakers tonight around the whether, although we did hear from Mr. Carby that members of the trade had asked for it to be brought forward, but I'm also conscious that it has to be paid for by the trade as well. So I think there needs to be a strong case to bring it forward. But it could potentially be that I get the feeling that we that currently maybe we have too many taxis for the amount of work that there is, and therefore taxi drivers are suffering as a result of that. So I think a case could be made to bring it forward, given the changes that we've seen. Thank you.
Councillor Hilton, please.
I was actually asked. Yeah. Is it Belman? I was only acknowledging that Councillor Irvine wanted to speak. It took quite a long time to get there, so apologies for that.
Okay, no problem. Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. I think quite good stuff has been said already. When I initially started the debate, I thought I might go one by one and come back to it, but it looks like I could have said more, but never mind. I think one of the questions I had, obviously a lot has been said about the policy to review the Hackney Carriage number of plates, and that surprised me in this. I think it should be coming from probably the members, the policy. That if policy is there for 3 years, it should have been committee to decide, not the trade to ask for it. I don't know why it's gone that way. I've no idea. But I think we should not be looking at, and as Councillor Crowe said, a compelling case needs to be made on that if that is the case. But on the other thing, which is I'm a little bit surprised with that, a supplementary agenda side of things, Gatwick said something about the drivers' well-being and all that side of things. But when Gatwick really could have helped the drivers, they didn't. They didn't help the trade at all in that sense. But now I do see a point unifying the teal plate, removing the teal plate and bringing all yellow plates, which may be a positive step. But given that, it's not been completely unification in that sense, because then Gatwick drivers will have no top box and no livery at all. So that's the report says they will be exempted. They are privatised. Either we need to go with one rule or we need to go one for all. And I do think if you want to go that, maybe next time a report needs to come out, think that it's a holistic approach for whole private trade. If they're all going to be yellow plate, if they're all going to be without the livery, or how can we have those drivers now coming into the town and work without the livery and then changing the teal plate? And I do think Gatwick now putting that as a positive spin on it to help the drivers. They could have helped when the drivers are suffering at airport with providing Uber a space over there, which is another contentious next point we're going to talk about. But I do think that is something doesn't relate in terms of agenda points. Doing something on one side, we're saying remove this livery, on the other side, remove the teal plate. Yes, remove the teal plate, remove the top box, but then there's no livery left. How are they going to come and work on that? So it's quite conflictive. As I said earlier in my starting point, the report is good. A lot of work has been done. If it's a public safety is at the heart of it, but then the point we're just debating over here and making those recommendations, but it doesn't look like they're interlinked and they support the trade in that way. Up to my head, I don't know, might be saying that, but it doesn't look like it's coherent approach or holistic approach has been taken on that.
Kareem, you want to add something?
Chair, if I may offer some clarity, door livery is not a recommendation that's contained in the report, but the committee under recommendation 2.5 of the report can direct officers, should they wish to review the current policy in relation to livery on this particular matter. Further clarity is that all licensed vehicles are also required to have an internal identification plate and a rear plate identifying which includes the number of passengers that they're allowed to transport and the vehicle licence number for identification purposes. Yes, I think that was the point that I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Belbin.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make 2 or 3 points. I agree that I think we need the knowledge to be as thorough as possible. If you're driving along and you suddenly find that the traffic is really, really bad, if you've got the knowledge in your head, you can immediately divert and get round another way. Whereas if you're relying perhaps solely on the way the SatLab is telling you or Google Maps, you can't do that. And then you're not offering the best service to the passenger. With regard to the top boxes, I do think if we remove them from private hire, it would give the residents clear indication of what this is a taxi with the top box and the private hire hasn't got one, and I think that is important. And my third point, I think I'm about to forget. Yeah, I think that was my 2 main points, that they do need the knowledge. And the fire extinguishers, yeah, I think it's possibly dangerous to have them in there if they don't know how to properly use them, because if you've got a fire, the safest thing to do is to get out of the vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's really about the teal plates policy issue, which I think what Councillor Nawaz has said. I'm more concerned about that now than I was earlier. And the reason would be that if we were to agree this, then it seems to me that we'd have a mismatch in what different taxi drivers were allowed to do in Crawley, in licensing Crawley, I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with that. And I wonder whether we could postpone a decision on this until the next committee, perhaps, on the teal plate issue, just because I think if we're talking about the livery, it would make sense to resolve these at the same time. Now, the other thing about the teal plate, even if we do reach a decision tonight, Chair, I noticed that we've been given a supplemental paper which, very helpfully tells us what Gatwick Airport and the employer thinks on this, but I don't think I've had an indication. If I've missed it, I've apologised. An indication of what the drivers have said on the issue, whether they support the abolition of the teal plate, and so it would be good to get some clarification if we know the answer to that.
Firstly, I've been told that by the drivers that they're not happy. They don't want the teal plate removed. And second question, my question is, if, say for instance, the teal plate is removed and they're given a yellow plate, will it mention Gatwick cars on there somewhere to differentiate them from the other private hire drivers, or not? Thank you.
I think it might be helpful to remind the committee about how the livery requirements at Gatwick came about. The group at Gatwick, and forgive me, I forgot the name of the organisation that was there before, Airport Cars Gatwick. There we go. They challenged the council's policy on livery requirements, and that was dealt with at Crawley Magistrates Court. And the sitting magistrates bench felt that they were satisfied, as the magistrates court, that the vehicles were sufficiently identifiable as a private hire vehicle, and therefore overturned our decision in relation to the then licence at Gatwick Airport for those cars. And that's how the negotiation around the teal plates came about. So it was, how will we as an enforcement body and the police be able to identify from a distance that that is a legitimate taxi? And so the teal plates were and the top boxes, which were also teal at the time, was decided as a sufficient way that we would be able to identify that. So I just thought it was as an important point, and I think links to the point that Councillor Khan has made, which is if there is a decision to change the teal plates, again, some of that security was around having Gatwick Airport cars on the teal plate also enabled us to identify that they were a properly licensed vehicle.
Chair, just to assist, the Magistrates' Court decision was prior to all of the current safeguarding guidance, best practice guidance and statutory requirements. The Magistrates' Court case pertaining to the airport was some considerable time ago, and the landscape has changed somewhat since then.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers, any more questions? All committee members have had the chance to speak, so we will move on to the vote. We will on the recommendations and their subsections one by one. As the chair, I'll move the recommendations, but just want to mention this will not have any bearing on which way I vote. Can I ask Vice Chair to please second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you. We will now take the vote. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to lead the voting process? When called upon, please raise your hands for all those in favour, all those against, and all those abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you. So
we go. Recommendation 2.1 is to approve the recommended changes to the private hire and Hackney Carriage licensing policy as set out in report HCS 085. There are 6 elements to this recommendation, so we're going to take those each individually. Recommendation A is to approve the changes in relation to disability awareness training for private hire operators. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so that is carried. Recommendation 2.1b is to approve the changes in relation to the knowledge test. All those in favour? All those against? And all those abstaining? 2. So recommendation 2.1b falls. 2.1c is to approve the recommended changes in relation to emergency equipment. All those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, recommendation 2.1c is also carried. Recommendation 2.1d, approving the changes in relation to the wheelchair assessment test. All those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? That's carried. Recommendation 2.1e is to approve the changes in relation to the removal of top boxes. All those in favour? 5. All those against? 9. And abstentions? None. So recommendation 2.1e falls. Recommendation 2.1f.
Chair, could I suggest that we defer the decision on this into the next licensing committee, as I mentioned earlier on? Would that be in order, or do we have to have a vote?
If you do, sorry, Chair, can I just procedurally, are you moving an amendment to that? Are you moving the deferral? And if so, you may need a seconder.
Deferral on this one item.
On that point.
On that point, would that? I mean, obviously, I haven't planned this, so I haven't got.
Okay, so if,
Okay. Sorry, Jess will just lead a vote on the deferral as moved by Councillor Jones.
Certainly, Councillor Crowe. I think it's based on what I said earlier on, which was that there is going to, as was indicated earlier on, there's going to be a proper consideration of livery at a future meeting. And it seems to me that things relating to the issuing of the teal plates and the potential discrepancy between what they're expected to have within the borough and what other taxi drivers, it would be more appropriate to have this all considered at the same meeting. I hope that doesn't sound unreasonable. It's meant to be helpful. Thank you.
Just for clarity on this vote, based on what you've just said, 2.6 is about there is nothing. If you're going to do this, are you going to try to link that to a livery, a further request for a livery? If so, you may want to move it together, and then we'll just simply vote, because then you'll delay it to a report. I'm just basing on what you've just said. At the moment there's no report about no recommendation about a livery, and you've indicated that you want the teal to be deferred.
I do apologise. I thought I heard one of the officers say that we'd be looking at livery in
You
the
have to.
future.
It would have to be moved. There's nothing in the agenda, so yeah. But you'd have to set the date if you want that report.
Okay, can you make a note for me to do that when we get to 2.6 then?
Yeah.
Thank you. That might be the easiest way to. Well, I'll do it as one, but notwithstanding, if anyone wants to add anything when we get to 2.6, I wouldn't wish to preclude it. Yes. 2.5, sorry. Yeah. Yes, okay, well, I'll move that then. Yes.
So Councillor Jones has moved an alternative proposal to defer recommendation 2.1F and also related to add to recommendation 2.5 the consideration of the livery signage at a future matter of the committee, meeting of the committee.
Livery and till plate.
Livery
Yes.
and till plates. Is there a seconder? Councillor Noaz. Okay, in that case, we'll do the show of hands for a vote on that amendment alternative proposal now, please. So all those in favour of deferring recommendation 2.1F. Okay. All those against and any abstentions? Okay, so 2.1F is deferred to a future meeting. Recommendation 2.2 asks that the committee considers the limitation policy on the number of Hackney Carriage licences issued by the council. The recommendation seeks a timeline for that decision to be considered. Is there a proposal for that, please?
The one, I'm pressing the wrong one, beg your pardon. Well, I would suggest we stick to the planned existing timetable unless there's that doesn't potentially stop us from at a future meeting if we felt that it does need to be brought forward to potentially seek to try to do that. But I would propose that we stick to the existing timetable because there hasn't been a lot of contributions saying otherwise. So but I could just clarify when that timetable is.
Clarity, it's been moved. Is there a seconder?
Okay, so the proposal that has been moved by Councillor Crowe is to continue with the existing timeframe for the consideration of the limitation policy. It's been seconded by Councillor Jaggard, so we'll move to a vote on that now. All those in favour? It's unanimous. All those against and any abstentions? Okay, so Councillor Crowe's proposal is approved. Recommendation 2.3 is that the committee notes that the Head of Community Services, in agreement with the Cabinet Member and Chair and Vice Chair of Licensing, has delegated authority to make minor amendments to the private hire and Hackney Carriage licensing policy. We won't be doing hands up on this, so I would just ask, is that agreed? Yes. And in the same vein, recommendation 2.4 is that the committee is asked to note that the council as licensing authorities progress in relation to the adoption and implementation of the statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards. Is that noted? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Recommendation 2.5 is that the committee identifies any other areas of the policy that the committee wishes to update and agree when these matters will be brought to the committee for consideration. As mentioned, we have one of those matters already under recommendation 2.5. Are there any committee members wishing to raise any other matters for future consideration? Okay. There are no other proposals that I can see, and Councillor Jones's proposal has already been voted on and agreed, so the committee has passed the recommendations 2.1, A, C, D and E.
No,
recommendation
not
2.
E. Not E.
Not E.
No, sorry, not E.
Sorry.
E, A, C and D.
Yeah.
E fell. It did not carry. Was not carried. Yeah.
The committee's passed those recommendations.
Before we begin item 6, I'm going to allow a few minutes for a change in officers' attendance. We are restarting the meeting. Okay. Okay. Yeah. We'll now move on to report HCS/086. Please, will the head of community services present the report? Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of the report that has been published. And essentially, the purpose of the report was to provide an overview of the investigation into the complaints about Uber's activities at Gatwick Airport. And I should just stress at this point, this is an information report for the committee. In terms of the background, the complaint was submitted by Unite the Union, representing private hire drivers working for Airport Cars Gatwick. And the main allegations are outlined in the report at paragraphs 3.2 and in 3.3. But in summary, they were alleging that Uber vehicles of a designated area for picking up passengers, and that Uber is allegedly making provision for the invitation and acceptance of business in an area in which their drivers and vehicles are not licensed, and that this is a breach of the licensing restrictions under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1976. The council officers undertook an investigation. They observed the Uber-branded signage and pick-up points at Gatwick Airport. They held discussions with Airport Cars Gatwick, Gatwick Airport Limited and Uber. The findings of the council's investigation found that Uber is promoting its brand at Gatwick Airport. However, despite its presence at the airport, they are not in contravention of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1976, and therefore the council does not uphold the complaint of Unite. All bookings were made via the Uber app, which is centrally managed in London and considered lawful. Signage was for directing passengers who are already booked, not for inviting new bookings. There was no evidence of Uber operating in contravention of the Act, and therefore the council does not consider there is a legal case for enforcement. In terms of the next steps for the council, it also sought advice from the barrister Philip Colvin KC that Uber is not operating in contravention of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1976. The council has chosen to publish this advice, or the council's advice, in full, which is shown in Appendix A of the report. And the reason for doing this is to demonstrate transparency with how this investigation has been conducted, and also to make it clear the powers which the council does and does not have. To note, this has also been done by exception. In conclusion, as stated in paragraph 6.3 in the report, the council agreed with the council's investigation findings, namely that Uber is not operating unlawfully at Gatwick Airport. The complaint lacks legal substance and there is no basis for enforcement action. In terms of the outcome, the council, as a licensing authority, has conducted a thorough investigation following complaints received by Unite the Union. The report does acknowledge the impact on at the airport cars Gatwick and Crawley licensed driver, but no legal breach has been found. And the council can only act within the boundaries provided to it as the licensing authority within the legislation. So in conclusion, no breach has been identified and there are no avenues for enforcement within the legislation as currently written. Any attempt to take legal action would ultimately be unsuccessful, and this position has been confirmed by the council and the QC advice. At this point, though, I would like to hand over to the monitoring officer for the council for some further guidance on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The last time this subject came before the licensing committee, I advised that the investigation and enforcement are not functions of the licensing committee. That's operational activity to be undertaken by officers. You were also advised at that last meeting that once the investigation was complete, officers would decide what enforcement action, if any, would be taken based on the findings of that investigation. So as you've just heard, that process has been followed and it's come to an end. It's not now the licensing committee's role or remit to go behind the investigation or the legal advice which has been obtained from external counsel. So as Georgina's explained, this is for information only. Normally, generally, findings from council enforcement investigations aren't generally shared with the public and all the related legal advice. But as Georgina's mentioned, because of the high level of public interest in this matter, we have shared the findings and the external legal advice. So this is being done because the organisation that was investigated, so in this case Uber, expressed no objection to that, to this approach. So this does not set a precedent for future enforcement actions and investigations. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now use my discretion as a chair to allow the speaker who has requested in advance to address the committee. I now call upon the Unite representative to speak on this item. Please approach the speaker's table. You have 5 minutes to address the committee, and you will see a countdown clock to my left. Thank you.
Good evening. Nick Veens, Unite the Union Rep at Gatwick Airport Cars. I'd like to sort of clarify something regarding the bookings that are already made. They're not pre-booked, they're booked at Gatwick. They're made at the time. So it is a booking that is made into a server that we do not know where. So that is a bit of an issue. So they're not pre-booked jobs. They are jobs that they're called ASAP, as soon as possible, like what you do with any taxi company within the area. That's the way that works. Also, we do have a little bit of a concern regarding the information that the KC was given for him to come to that decision, because you've all read the report and you must look at one of the points, I think it's point 9, I think it is, where it turns around and says that Uber do not operate in Crawley. And we know they do for a fact because we've had the deputy mayor get out of one in a no entry zone on the boulevard. So to actually turn around and say that they do not operate in Crawley, I think I must be living in cuckoo land. So please, can you just clarify that point? So can you clarify that point, please? and the investigation, what material he was given to come to that decision, i.e., did he take an Uber in Crawley?
Want to answer this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I can't speak for the KC in terms of how he's framed it. My understanding is that he's saying they don't operate as in terms of an operator as defined in the licensing law. Would be my interpretation of the KC advice.
Thank you. Yes, please.
You say they do not operate, but they do operate. I mean, we know they operate because we see them every day, unfortunately, and we see them in the town. There's drivers in the town that do not go out of the town. They operate in Crawley. So I'm just asking, was the evidence, can we see the evidence that was given? Because we gave a majority of it, and we did ask one of the licensing officers, did you book an Uber in Crawley to Crawley? We was told yes, because we said that we have that evidence. So we have that evidence since 2020. That's what we have. So we want to know, because you've waived your rights to do with the legal side of it. That's why the report has been released. So we should know what the evidence was, what he was given to come to that conclusion.
Well, I think all the information we had was provided to the to the KC. I mean, we can't really go into the details of all the legal aspects here. But if officers want to add anything further,
I mean, we're intending to publish what we've published, which sets out what our findings were and the advice on it. The KC was given the findings of our investigation and asked to comment on the legality of it based on the evidence that we had. We're clear in the report that we know that that Uber, they are at the airport, they are, that they're there. All of that was made clear to the KC, but the advice from the KC was in terms of their activities there. It's not a breach of licensing law. That's the advice from the KC.
Regarding that, though, you have to say regarding that it's not in breach of licensing law.
we allowed you 5 minutes to make a statement, not for questioning. I mean, I have allowed questions. So I think if you want to make some further comments, you can, but please, we can't really go into the details of legal aspects here. Thank you.
Okay, I get that. We can't go into legal aspects, but the fact of the findings and regarding the information that they were given, that wasn't clear in the report. It was the outcome that we was given, not on the finding. You know what? That was the findings, but where's the information that he was given? That's all I'm asking for. We will do a Freedom of Information Act. We will do that. We will request that because we was told that we was going to get that, and we haven't been given that at all. And you guys haven't been given it, more to the point, unless you do know the information that was given to the KC. But thank you.
Chair, can I just respond to that? So in terms of the report, the paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3 set out the information that we provided, the complaint that we provided. So we haven't published all of the documents we sent, but as colleagues from Unite will know, that there was a lot of information you provided, but that sets out the summary of the of what we provided to the KC as the complaint. So yeah, paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3 in the report, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm just allowing one more speaker, but please, it's for the statement, not the questions. You can make a statement, but we can't allow for any further questions. Thank you.
Answer the question from the licensing. All I want to know is, they say that there's nothing going on, there's no rules been broken. Can you tell me, 150 cars waiting in an AVA, are you telling me that all their jobs are pre-booked? That's all I want to know. Are all the jobs, 150 vehicles waiting in an AVA, you're saying there's no all the jobs are pre-booked? Is that correct?
we can't really answer any more questions on the. I mean, you had the question time where you are allowed to ask the questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please. Okay. I would like to make it clear that this is an information item, so we do not have any recommendations to consider or decisions to make. Committee members should keep in mind that the investigation has concluded and the legal advice has been provided. Would committee members like to make any comments about this report? Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. We regretfully end up in a position where the legal advice, which we have published in full, is almost completely unequivocal. There is no prospect of successfully challenging these activities. It would require a change in legislation to prevent what is happening, and that is not something this council has any power over. This must be taken up with those in Parliament. Now, it is most certainly a case where legislation has not kept up with technology, would be my observation. And I can also say that no one on this committee has been left in any doubt of the frustration of many local taxi drivers. I have looked at this whole thing very carefully indeed. But I have to say the process in the investigation has run its course, and the council cannot intervene any further. All avenues have been exhausted, at least as far as this council is involved. And I say that with absolute sincerity. And I appreciate how disappointing this will be for members of the trade to get that message. And I'm saddened by that.
Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I just want to thank the officers for the work that they've done on this. It has taken a long time, but the work has been extensive and has arrived at conclusions. I do have to say that I do think there is a chasm between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law in how this has played out. But unfortunately, we cannot ignore the letter of the law, and therefore to make any meaningful change will require changes in legislation, or indeed, something from government that would move the goalposts to close that chasm that I've just referenced between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, because this doesn't feel at all like it's keeping within the spirit of the law, but it has, and it's been demonstrated, kept within the letter of the law. However disappointing, I think many people will find that. Thank you, Chairman.
Fine, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I completely agree with everything that Councillor Jones has said, and I thank him for saying it in such terms. And of course, I've been a member of this council, as I often remind people, for many years. I think it's 25, 26 years now, and it's very, very rare that I can remember, but I'm not sure I can ever remember, the council obtaining a QC or a KC opinion with all the costs that goes with that, which must be quite considerable. And I think that shows the extent to which this council has been prepared to investigate this complaint absolutely thoroughly. And I'm sorry if the complainant is disappointed by that, but I think as a council we've gone as far as we can go with it. And I just wonder, I mean, normally if someone complains to the council and the council rejects the complainant then does have the opportunity to take their complaint to the local government ombudsman, and that, to my mind, is about the only route left open.
Thank you, Chair. The decision is what it is. I think at this stage you can possibly go against what the KC has said. I think, as Michael says, unequivocal the advice. It's been a tough process, hasn't it? Ever since last June, when we had the first special licensing committee meeting. And yeah, I think it's important that it was a thorough investigation. And we've heard, and I understand the disappointment because we've heard the frustrations. We've had, you know, protest after protest, and it's been peaceful, and I'm grateful to that. But we've had to put up with a committee's a lot of anger and a lot of upset, and I think we've tried to look at it in the round. The only question I've got really is the investigation has to be thorough, but could it have been expedited any quicker than it has been? I think I need to ask that question because the process has been going on since I was elected virtually, and it's taken up to 9 months. And when you look at the KC's opinion, I'm not sure that if you'd looked at it 6 months ago, you might have come up with the same conclusions. Notwithstanding that you had to do those investigations and they had to be thorough and they had to tick, not only cross the T's and dot the I's. So that would be my question, and I don't think that's going across what the monitoring officers said to us by asking that question.
Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Thank you, Chair. Yes, it did take a long time. We wanted to be very, very thorough with it. One of the reasons it took quite a long time is because Unite were incredibly active in terms of providing new information. As things changed at the airport, as new things came to light, they were sending information through, and we thought it was right and proper that we investigated and considered all of the evidence they were providing in order to do real justice to the investigation. We could have concluded earlier, but I think as more information was coming through, it's important all of that was properly considered to ensure this had the fullest overview by officers who were considering the complaint.
As a supplementary to that, I assume that all that information was taken into consideration when it was taken to the KC.
Yes.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. I think what I wanted to say has been said by other members already anyway, but I just want to say we can understand the frustration and we hear them on a regular basis. It is not the decision they probably hoped for, but this is what we binded by the law to follow the legislation, and I do think the frustration comes from because at the end of the day, it's their living, and if their living is in question, they're feeding the families, then that's why they are a little bit more worried about it, and this is how the trade is being affected by Uber's operation in Crawley, and I don't think so. There's an easy answer for that, unfortunately, but I think next steps probably, as Councillor Irvine says, maybe looking for the ombudsman side of things, the law ombudsman, or try to lobby the Parliament or MPs or ministers. That's probably is the way forward for this one if the law needs to be changed, because it is in effect of the law introduced about cross-border licensing. I think that's probably is. But we understand and we feel the pain of the trade on this, and it's not the answer you hoped for, but this is what the KC has come for, and Councillor Hilton said it must have cost a lot of money to the Council, Councillor Irvine, a lot of money, and Council has took that decision to investigate in thorough and gone over and beyond with that, but it's probably not in our remit to anything to be embargoed or apply any of the restrictions on Uber at this point in time. Thank you.
I know. We did write to Gatwick Airport, TfL, and also to the ministry as well. And we'll continue our efforts in this regard. But just want to ensure the trade that we have done whatever we could, and in the future we'll make efforts in this regard. Thank you. Councillor Khan, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, well, you've now mentioned that you have already written to TfL and ministers, and that's what I was going to suggest, that put pressures on the Parliament. That's all we can do, get together, put pressure on the Parliament. And I would like to thank the officers for all the hard work that they've done and all the work and all the time. So thank you. But I think that's all you can do now is put pressure.
Do we haven't had any response as yet. Thank you. Do we have any more speakers? No. So there are no further requests to speak, so this item is concluded. Thank you. The supplemental agenda has been dealt with under the other items, so the business of the committee is concluded. I declare the meeting closed at 20:49. Thank you.